Hey, this is Chris Lukowski, and going to be talking about how to free yourself in 4 steps, so 4 practical steps from an alcoholic, okay, and how to draw to the Lord and bond with the Lord rather than get caught up in the alcoholism and be what they call it codependent a lot of times. The first step is to realize that alcoholism is rooted in abandonment. Okay, yesterday I talked about this and just focused on the alcoholic. Um, but here I'm going to kind of give you kind of the same framework as and knowing where the alcoholic is trapped in, and he's usually affected physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Okay, and that's why it's so addictive and why it's so strong. Okay, if it's not rooted in abandonment, then a lot of times you can free it up a lot easier. That's why people do get freed up somewhat easier if it's not rooted in some type of trauma or abandonment than if it's just a small physical attachment that they have or mentally or emotionally. Sometimes they can just break it off, and it's not that challenging to do. But if it's much more deep and is rooted in a traumatic event, or abandonment, then it's a lot more stronger. Okay, because that person is rooted. It is rooted in some a very emotional problem that God needs to heal. Okay. Step two, it is wrong. It's a wrong way of coping. Okay, alcoholism. It's a wrong way of coping. That's the key there. It's not because they're trying, that they can't stop or they have lack of willpower, even though it could be part of it. Usually, it's just that they can't cope any other way, or it's almost impossible, or that they've learned this coping mechanism, and this is the way that they run to all the time or most of the time. And they even a person who is alcoholic or any other addiction can try other things, and they're not able to. It's never going to satisfy until they get healed with Christ, and that's why in alcoholism you have to get healing from the Holy Spirit to really get freed from it. People can somewhat do it through like 12 steps and through other means, um, but it still can be quite challenging because there's still that pain and that hurt and that brokenness inside that isn't really dealt with. And so that's why I think that there's not a lot of success when it comes to alcoholism. Um, so it's a wrong way of coping, and that why that it's, in the case of the person who's codependent, that you're the one that's having to deal with an alcoholic. Your job is to ask God for forgiveness for agreeing with the addiction, okay, or to come alongside enabling the addiction. And sometimes you don't feel like you're enabling it; you just feel like, well, there's not much I can do, and there really isn't. However, what a lot of times happens is you don't know how to cope with this, you don't know how to get to God in this, so your way of coping is to excuse it and allow the person to be an alcoholic and to come alongside it. Now, you could think that's not your fault, and in some ways it isn't, but because of the fact that you have come in agreement with it because you didn't know what else to do, now you have to release that person. You have to release the alcoholic, and you have to release your part in it. And that's what forgiveness is you're releasing your part in it, your responsibility of it, and say, you know what, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to God. I'm sorry to myself. I forgive myself, and I forgive that person for me having this agreement with the alcoholism. Okay, so once you do that, once you forgive the alcoholic and yourself, and you ask God for forgiveness for this agreement, it allows you to be freed up for God to heal. Okay, because then you're not being, you're not being, you're not giving Satan a foothold now to say, oh, but look at you in the past, you've done this, this, and this, and this, and it's worked. And otherwise, if you think that if you think that you can be a part of apart from them, it's going to be such a bad thing, and um you're actually separating from them. And what that does is that if there's any kind of tie there, you're going to suck right in. You're going to suck right in because the tie is still there, and Satan's going to be able to pull on that tie, and you get sucked right in. That's why you have to really release that person. I know it's sometimes hard. That's why he has to ask God forgiveness, and you have to, this is how the third step is how to get free from this tie too. This feeling like you have to be part of this. And this is the third one. Ask God to show you why you came into agreement and what feelings were involved. Okay, ask him why. Why did I come into agreement? Sometimes you might just excuse the alcoholism. Okay, you might say, "Oh, so with they'll change." They said they'll change. They don't drink that much. Now, if you did that, then there's probably something in your past that allowed you to negate that red flag, because that is a total red flag. And you probably might have had an alcoholic in your family. Your parents might have had some alcoholism. Your friends might have been an alcoholic, and you excuse them, and you're trying to help them. There are a lot of different reasons. That's why you ask God to show you why you came under agreement. Okay, there's many different reasons why we think that we can be okay with an alcoholic. Okay, you want to help them. You think you can save them. You think you need to save them. You think that's your job. That you can do this. You need to. Sometimes it's a matter of you feel like you didn't help a friend, or failed a parent, or your sibling, or a cousin, or anybody, family member, and then you are reacting to that. Well, ask God. God, show me why do I feel like I'm excusing the alcoholism? Why I feel like I have to be in a relationship with an alcoholic? Okay, and that way, then you can start asking God for the feelings. Now, if the person was an alcoholic and all of a sudden changed with the alcoholic, why were you accepting the alcoholism when it started happening? Okay, were you feeling like, well, if I lose them, then what's going to happen? Or do you feel like, well, it's no big deal, that um, if they, because I've had other people be alcoholics and I was able to cope. There's a lot of things that happen. Why is it very important in the area in this when it comes to this? Because that way you can start realizing what God needs to heal. Okay, once you start knowing why, if it's because a friend or a parent or a family member or the atmosphere you're under, then you can look at the feelings in those areas. Because if it's a friend, you're going to look at feelings with your friends. If it's parents or family, you can look at feelings when it came to your family. Okay, so key on the feelings in the area where you had alcoholism or some type of connection with alcoholism or something similar to that. Sometimes it can transfer from drugs to alcoholism, but usually it's an alcoholism problem that you're tied to, or a person that's has alcoholism. So then you start, asking God, what feelings were involved there. You need to ask the Holy Spirit, because when I went under somebody that asked, said to really get into the Holy Spirit and be open to what He has to say in your areas of your youth and in specific situations. And I've had counseling before. I mean, lots of counseling before. Never did I really enter into it with the Holy Spirit and His leading. And when I did, I found out others. I found out things that were not visible to my mind. And that's the problem. Is sometimes when you go into even Christian counseling or secular counseling, it's about trying to figure out in your mind. And sometimes we miss things. And sometimes the demonic is covering up. Sometimes we're covering it up. Okay. And so that's why when we ask the Holy Spirit, sidesteps that, and He knows our heart. He knows the hidden things of our heart. It says in the Bible, He knows the hidden things in our heart. And He can go bypass that and show you something that you might have even forgotten. Okay? He might have showed you feelings of anger. That's what happened to me. Or frustration or abandonment yourself. Or, abuse, or even verbal abuse, or whatever it is. Once you start getting those feelings identified, then you ask God to show you when these feelings began. Okay, make sure that you start recognize the feelings, but try to find the earliest ones, because that's where the root usually is, and then you can see the progression and ask. Then God can start healing you in all of your past, not just when you're a teenager or whatever. The earliest as you can. Sometimes you can't, but God can give it some type of sense. Like for instance, God showed me there was something that happened to me when I was 3 or 4. I don't remember it. I have a sense though that that's what happened, because God showed me. And I don't get into I didn't have to get into this big ordeal. I just, God, please help me in this area and just free me up and know that you were trying to take care of me in that. And that's where that healing comes into play, is that God was trying to touch you in those areas and heal you in those areas at that time and be there so you can be freed up and not have to feel like you have to cope alone and come and protect yourself or reach out to somebody for protection. Because that's usually what happens is these feelings come out and you're trying to reach for somebody and all that's involved is somebody that's distant or an alcoholic parent or even alcoholic friends or somebody. And usually that's where the tie comes with an alcoholism is that one of the ties is with an alcoholic. Okay, and it could be still you still be frustrated with that person. You may even come against the alcoholic in your life that was a parent. Okay, oh, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him, I hate the alcoholism. But because you as a kid needed a tie, needed somebody for comfort, you're reaching out for that person and you were trying to get this tie there and you weren't getting it, and then you meet up with this person that has this issue or ends up having this issue, and it feels good because you're like, oh, this is just like my parent or my friend or this person that I really wanted to bond with, and now I'm getting it. And then when you feel like you've got it, now you feel like you can change that person. So when they change, you sense or your brokenness feels like it will become whole. Because if you could fix this person, that feeling of brokenness in the past will be healed because I fixed it in the present. It's a lie. It's not, that doesn't how way it works. Because even if this person changes, you always have the brokenness down here that God wasn't able to supply. So then you're always wondering, what if they go back? What if they go back? And then everything scares you because the brokenness that's in the present is still fearful from the abandonment or whatever feelings you had of the past. And you live with these feelings and feelings and feelings, always wondering, whoop, with these feelings and when they're going to come back and when this alcoholism is going to come back. Okay. And things will remind you, oh, that emotion, that anger, that response you gave is just like when you were alcoholic or just when you were drinking. It was just like that. No, the person could be freed up. It just could be anger, and it has nothing to do with alcoholism, or it could just be frustration or emotion, or it could be just it could be frustration about something totally unrelated to you. With their job, and then you are freaking out. He's like, oh, now he's frustrated, just like when he was alcoholic. And that's why you need healing from Jesus Christ. Okay, so the 4 steps is recognizing the alcoholic is it's the alcoholism is rooted in abandonment, and it can affect them physically, emotionally, spiritually, and so that they have to deal with this stuff. And your job is to realize that it's a wrong way of coping. It's not has to do with anything with you. It's their problem. They're not coping well, and you need to ask for forgiveness for agreeing with that addiction, whatever your part was, and forgiving them, releasing them. And then third, ask God to show you why you came under agreement. Okay, and the feelings, and then involved with whoever it was, and those feelings at that time when you're younger, and ask God to show you when the earliest times when you're feeling that way, so you can begin that healing. God can enter in and show how much He cares back then and now. And then you don't have to be controlled that person when they get mad or upset or or that they're physically freaking out or they're emotionally just a wreck and mentally they are abusive and they spew out all kinds of lies and stuff about the situation and how they're what you're doing and what even they're doing, because sometimes mentally they're all like screwed up and they'll say it's your fault, or they'll say that, well, I'm just a mess, and I can't help myself. And some of it's based on truth, but then some of it's lies. Yes, they can help themselves. They can go to Christ. They can seek the Lord. Okay, but they choose not to, and they don't want to go that direction because they can always ask for help. And that's why you can look at some of my other videos and point them to that. If they don't want to go that direction, then you got to release them, and you have to follow your healing. And then God will show you, after all this is done and you're getting more and more healing, then He can direct you on what to do each day. Because if He doesn't change, you're going to have to continue to just be in the Lord. And that's where it gets sometimes difficult, because now you're living with a person that's unsaved, basically, because when they're not getting help and they're not being in connection with the Lord, it's like being unsaved, and sometimes it ends up being that they're not in the Lord and they're not being, they're going down the path of destruction, and you can't follow them. You have to go this way, and so you just have to ask God what your step is, what your role in it is. Sometimes it is separation. Sometimes you need to be separate from the situation and say, I mean, it's time apart. Move out of the house, or he moves out. And sometimes that changes a person. I've seen that several times. Where a person leaves and then they realize how serious it is, and that changes them, and they draw. I got to go to the Lord, and then they get to the Lord, and then you can work together. You can rebond, but in a healthy way with the Lord. So that's the first steps, and pray that you do well. And if you have any need for outside help, just contact me or Kristen through this YouTube video in the comment section, or I got Facebook, Chris Olkowski, and like and subscribe. Um, and if you know somebody that needs to deal with this or is dealing with this, share with somebody, and we hope that we can be a help to you and to others. Okay, God bless.